Hello, Sociology scholars. We are back for part number 2 of the slideshow titled Urbanization. Okay, so this was the last slide that we were on, and our next slide is a graphic. There we go. Oh, move me down here. Okay. So the graphic is titled "The World's Megacities Are Set for Major Growth." You can see that this is a picture of the world, the globe, and it then gives you a megacity, its location, how many people are in it, in 2011, that's the light blue, and then the darker blue is the projection in the year 2025. Okay, so without spending too much time on it for slideshow purposes, I do encourage you to pause the video here so that you can look at the statistics, get an idea of these projections, and then press play when you are ready to go again. Okay, so I am going to go to the next slide. And this slide is titled Push and Pull Factors. All right, so you can obviously see that this is it's an apartment building, a lot of people living in a super concentrated area. Okay. I want to start this slide off with the question, why do people from rural areas move to large areas that don't have the right kind of jobs, they don't have enough jobs, and there really isn't a great place for them to live? One of the answers that sociologists have come up with is that some of these people that are moving from rural areas to the urban area, they're actually pushed out of their villages because expanding rural populations, they can't be supported by the existing agricultural economy. So the way that modern agriculture is today in countries all around the world, it's not providing the right kind of jobs or enough jobs to let people live and earn a living. Sorry, I messed that wording up a little bit, but they can't make a living on the agricultural economy out in the sticks, out in the country, in the rural areas. They're attracted or pulled by the belief of opportunities for better education, employment, social welfare support, and medical care. So just because they are a villager, just because they were born and they lived as an adult in the country, it doesn't mean that they don't know what the city offers. In fact, they have these ideas that the city has different opportunities that can support them. Even if it isn't entirely true, the idea of an opportunity is one that people grasp onto. Okay. All right, so we are going to be ending our slideshow on suburbanization in the United States. Okay, so we started the first part of our slideshow with it being urbanization on the global perspective, and now we're looking specifically at the suburbs in the United States. Okay, so what is the definition of suburbanization? It's the loss of population of a city to surrounding areas. So the classic example of suburbanization in the United States is in the 1950s. A good portion of the population in the 1950s, or right before the 1950s, lived in the cities. World War II ends, we have the promotion of families, the baby boom, people start to move out of the cities into surrounding neighborhoods called the suburbs, okay? Why are people attracted to the suburbs? Because of technological developments, improvements in communication, and developments in transportation, okay? All of these are attractions to the suburbs, but also attraction to the suburb for families, but also for businesses. Okay, so let's talk about improvements in communication. This can be the telephone, back in the day, radios. Fast forward a little bit to computers, fax machines, today the internet. Developments in transportation. Again, back in the day, we had trains. There was the development of the highways, vehicles, okay? Suburbs allow people to escape problems of urban living without leaving the urban areas. So the suburbs aren't exactly the sticks or the country. They offer the same kind of amenities as urban areas, but they're not living in the city, okay? And they are attractive because of decreased crowding, traffic congestion, lower taxes, better schools, less crime, and reduced pollution. Now, I know that some of you are saying out loud or in your head, well, that isn't necessarily true today. You're right. So think about this a little bit from the historical perspective, but also today, some of these reasons do still attract people to leave the city for the suburbs or communities that lay outside of the cities. Okay? So continuing with suburbanization in the United States, I chose a 1950s picture of the suburbs for you right here. Suburbs remained largely white until the 1970s, okay? Now, without doing a huge, long history lesson, part of that has to do with economic reasons and then racial and prejudiced reasons. Businesses followed more affluent people to the suburbs where they could find lower tax rates, less expensive land, and less congestion. This is a historical example and explanation, but it's also a modern one. I want you to think of the state of Washington, where most of us live. And I want you to think about some of the industries and businesses that are not in the I-5 corridor. They have moved to central Washington or to eastern Washington. Tri-Cities is one of these areas. Spokane is one of these areas where land used to be, maybe not so much anymore, but it's less expensive than, say, the I-5 corridor around Seattle, around Tacoma, which those land prices are very, very expensive. You can also think about the United States. We have Amazon, we have Walmart, we have some of these large corporations that are moving to not as populated areas in the United States for that exact reason. Land is less expensive, lower taxes because the land is less expensive and there's not as many people living there. Okay, so the result of the exodus of the middle class, manufacturers and retailers, there was a shrinking of the central city tax base. So, we have to kind of take emotion out of this when we're trying to understand what happened with urbanization and then suburbanization of the United States. There's a push and pull factor. There are positives and negatives to living in the city as opposed to living in the suburbs. And then we're going to talk about people moving back into the cities, okay? Positives and negatives to all of it. Okay. The last note on this slide is the central city dilemma, and it's defined as a concentration of people in need of public services. I'm going to move this up here and cover up the top part a little bit. Without the tax base generated funds to provide for them. So in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, what we see with people moving out of the cities into the suburbs and that lower tax base is that there are problems that arise challenges for cities when that tax base moves out. There's not enough taxes sometimes when the middle class and the affluent move out of the city to be able to support the people that are still living in the city. Here we go with our next slide. Some counter trends do exist. Some city governments now require certain public employees to live in the city, and they encourage others to do so through incentives. So that the middle class and the affluent that work for city governments are not living in other communities outside of the city. Those governments, those city governments, are requiring that their employees live in the city. Okay, there we go. This term, gentrification, you might have heard of it before, and if you haven't, it is defined as the development of low-income areas by middle-class homebuyers, landlords, and then professional developers. I've got some photos, some images that are going to reinforce the ideas of gentrification. Okay, there's a fairly significant movement of middle-class people back to the central city, especially in, I don't know, the last decade, the last 15 years or so. Okay, so here are some images that help us to understand gentrification. So here's a before and after picture of an apartment building, of what it used to look like before a middle class or a professional developer bought the land, the building, and then rebuilt it after. It's going to attract a different group of people to live in the city where it has been rebuilt. And then another few, see if I can get this out of here a little bit more. Another few images to help you understand that there are positives and negatives to gentrification. So remember that it is middle class, affluent people, people that have the means to be able to buy homes and businesses in a city area that is considered low income or run down. And so they build up, they put new money into this city area. Okay, so I want to present these images as positives and negatives to gentrification without putting too much of my own narration onto the positives and negatives. So here's a good time to pause the video and look at the images, the graphics, and try to formulate your own opinion on what you think about gentrification. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Okay, and so we're getting to the end of suburbanization in the United States, in that there's another concept titled Edge City, and the definition is it's a suburban unit specializing in a particular economic activity, for example, computer tech or healthcare. So if we go backwards 20, 30, 40 years, I think about Boeing in Seattle and then them moving out to Everett, right? So we're talking about the aviation industry. Everett used to be, maybe not so much anymore, but it used to be considered an edge city, okay? And then the next concept, this is the one that we're going to end with, is new urbanism. The definition reads that it involves new housing and shopping areas built to mimic old style neighborhoods. So the idea is that we are going back to the cities, we are building up these cities to have kind of that old world, old neighborhood kind of feel to it, to attract families, to attract businesses back to places that they might want to live. So this is one example, and then we are going to end with just a few graphics. And then this one is it's an artist's rendering of what new urban development can look like. All right, everyone, that ends our slideshow part 2 on urbanization. Please let me know if you have any questions. Bye.